Hey everybody! So since it is October, I really wanted to do a book video that's related to spooky things, mysterious things, creepy things. So I have a pile of books next to me and I'm going to recommend some of my favorite books that I have that are spooky, fall into that category that I have in my collection. There are definitely scarier books out there. I just don't happen to have them in my collection. So let's get started. I have my little tea because I am so under the weather today. That's why I'm just dressed Ariana Grande vibes with the sweat pants and shirt. Ah, tea, so good. And I have a little squirrely here holding my tea bags. So cute. Also, I have been getting comments on my book videos about how I don't read enough classics, how all these mean things. And just off the bat, when I make these book videos and I recommend books to you or I show some of the beautiful books that I have in my collection, in no way or form am I saying that I'm a know-it-all, that I've read all the books that are there in existence. No, that is not me. And I'm not even giving that vibe. There are people who have read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books. That's not me. I work as a nurse. There's other things that I do, and I just don't have the time to read as much as I'd like. And when I do read, I just read books that I like. Sometimes it's a graphic novel, sometimes it's fantasy. I don't always read classics, and that's okay. There is no pressure, there is no competition to read the books that you think you should be reading versus the books that you want to be reading. It's just a book, read what you want, and I'm going to read what I want, but that's it of my rant. Let's get started with the books. So the first one is Lord of the Flies, and I have this beautiful deluxe edition. This is the front. And here is the back. I'm sure a lot of you actually read this book in like junior high school or high school, but basically it's circling around a group of boys that are stranded on an island and they are trying to survive, but through the survival, a lot of dark themes come into play and there's so much violence in this book and it just becomes scarier and scarier and more violent as the book progresses. As you can see in this title, his face is smeared with blood. It's very, very dark. It's very, very scary. And the ending will have, if you're like me, you crying. So I will link all of these books as usual down below. And you can, of course, get a better synopsis of all of these books. But this one, definitely, when I read it, it definitely scared me just because of how dark it got and how violent it got towards the end. The next book here is this one, and this is Perfume, The Story of a Murderer. Now, this book majority of the book is fairly interesting. The real darkness and creepiness is like towards the end. And basically, this is a book about a man who is just amazing in terms of his sense of smell. He can smell everything. He can distinguish all the types of scents, but then he becomes obsessed with finding the perfect scent in terms of finding a perfect human scent. So because he has an amazing sense of smell, he himself doesn't smell. Like if he was to walk past somebody, he has no scent, and he always gave the impression for other people that he's like cold and creepy, so he can never get friends and can never really get into society the way that he wants to. So he becomes obsessed with making a perfume that smells like a human being so that he can use it for himself, and he becomes obsessed with that idea. And then it just becomes darker and darker and creepier. And when I read the end, I literally put my book down and I was just like, what the F did I just read? It was so creepy and so weird, and I highly recommend this book. The next book is Coraline, and I had to include it. The first time that I've heard of this story was actually through the movie, and I love Coraline, one of my favorite movies. And this is the graphic novel edition. I do have the regular novel edition, but I thought I would include the graphic novel just because it's a little bit more of a fun way of reading this story. And so the story is slightly different than the movie. There's a few characters that are not in the actual story, but both versions are good in my opinion. But it's basically about a girl who moves to this pink house, and there are a lot of characters that live next to her, and she kind of goes on all these adventures, and then her parents go missing. There's another world where there's an other mother who wants to put buttons in her eyes. Very, very dark, very creepy, but a really cool adventure. And I love the graphic novel edition. I will insert some clips of the inside, but it's just spooky and I love it. And the story is just so cool and I can't get enough of it. and I can't get enough of the movie. I really recommend that as well. Okay, the next one is a series of 7 comics, and this is Lock and Key, Welcome to Lovecraft. This is the first one. It's by Joe Hill. Now this collection of stories is so violent and so graphic and so gory, but so amazing and dark. It's so cool. It's so hard to even explain the entire story because there's so many levels of it. But essentially, different keys will open up different portals, and there's a family who starts off with having a death, and so they move to this house, and so much happens. I don't even want to give anything away because the best way of going into this story is just going into it blind and just reading it and being blown away. Each comic will feature a different key on it, and it's so good. Like, definitely one of my favorite graphic novel comic collections of all time. Even though it's dark and violent, so good, and I highly recommend it for Halloween. The next book, we're gonna wind down from the violence for a little bit, and this is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of this. And although it's very hyped in the whole like classics community, this book is pretty gothic, and towards the end of the book, once you know certain things kind of unravel, it becomes very dark as well and creepy. And what I love about this book is that as you read it, the words really set you into the environment and you just become immersed in this world. And it's just so great. Such amazing storytelling. And for me, when I read it, it wasn't predictable in my opinion. And the end was very in your face and such a great book. It's a lot of it, but it's worth the read, and it's very dark, and I love it. Plus, it's a love story as well. So it's like a dark love story. You can't go wrong. Okay, the next one's very heavy, but it is this book here, and it is gorgeous, and I will link somewhere here all of the Barnes & Noble's classics that I own. I did an entire video of it, but this is the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe, and it's this stunning edition, and it's quite heavy. I could do curls with it, but what's awesome about this book, I'm sure there's no introduction needed for Edgar Allan Poe, but this is a huge collection of a variety of stories, some of them darker, creepier than the next, but I feel like you can't have a spooky reading without Edgar Allan Poe. And what's amazing about his writing is that he just does it so artistically. It's not like he'll write stuff just for the sake of being creepy or dark. He'll really slowly wind his words so that you're so like entrapped in that story that once it starts getting scary, you're just like, there's no going back. It's so good. Like Tall Tale Heart, they used to do stories of that, like theater plays in my college, and no matter how many times I watched it, I loved it because it's just so dark, but it's so great. It's not your typical cliche Halloween stories and poems. So amazing writer and poet. Highly recommend it. I'm saying that for all of these stories, but I wouldn't recommend it if I didn't think they were good. Next one is this one, and this is House of Leaves, and this is a really beautiful edition as well. So this book is kind of complicated to describe, so I'm going to actually pull out my phone to read its synopsis because I feel like I'll butcher it. But essentially, this is kind of a story within a story, and let me get out my phone and I'll read you the synopsis. So it's a novel constructed from a cult classic, originally passed around as heaps of paper from friend to friend. House of Leaves is a psychological or gothic novel consisting of 3 different but intertwined storylines, each told from the perspective of a different person. So it is basically different perspectives, but it's really cool because the book itself has a very interesting layout as well. Some pages are pretty much blank except for a few words. Other pages will take up the entire page. Sometimes it's footnotes, sometimes it looks like credits, sometimes it looks like a screenwriter was writing it. It's very complex, but it's so dark, and it's just another book where it's best to go into it blind and just immerse yourself into that world. such a great book. It's super scary. I checked on Amazon and sold out at the moment, but I will still link all of these books down below, including that one, and hopefully it'll be available at that point in time. But the last book that I have in this video is one of my favorites as well, and it is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, and this is a graphic novel, and this one is so beautiful. It is made up of a collection of dark stories, and technically kids can read it, but it's pretty spooky. But what I really love about this is that it features such beautiful colors within the story that really just bring the stories that it talks about to the next level, giving it that creepy, spooky, gory type of vibe. Sometimes the stories will be in black and white. Sometimes the stories will be more in color. And sometimes there's just a pop of color, but they really kind of amplify each story and have some of the scariest images I have ever seen. I love this, and it's perfect for the October spooky season. So those are the books that I would recommend for October and for Halloween. I would love to hear, what are the scariest books that you have ever read? Like, if you had to pick one, tell me down below and I will check it out. Because I was going to get some Stephen King books, but there's so many and they all have amazing reviews. But I'm sure there are other books that are spooky. So definitely tell me down below. And I will see you guys in my next video, which will be an October ASMR video. Bye!